welcome back. Today I'm talking about Ronin, which is the film that was made by John Frankenheimer not long before he died. It has nothing to do with Saoirse Ronan, whose channel is tied to mine through the podcast. I'm sure he's seen that film. It's one of De Niro's last really enjoyable parts in a film before self-parody took over. And what's a shame now is we see the bad De Niro films, and it makes it hard to look back in his time before this film, where there was 25 years to 30 years of really good stuff, and the last 20 years just seems to overshadow that in lots of ways. But he chose those films; it was his fault. But Ronin is really enjoyable. It's an old-fashioned spy action movie by Frankenheimer, who was a director who I always had a soft spot for. I mean, he made some bad films, but he made a lot of really good films too. I mean, Manchurian Candidate Seconds, from the 60s are unbeatable. He made a lot of really good stuff. French Connection 2, Black Sunday were both enjoyable pot boilers. Even Grand Prix, which had been problems. There's lots of other ones too. I'm blanking. But he was a director I've always had time for. Always used to enjoy watching his films. Always went to see. If he would direct the film, I would give it a shot. Even Island of Dr. Moreau. So Ronin was his last hurrah. He made Ranger Games after this, which did not do well. And he made some really good films for HBO during the 90s, in between the theatrical films too, which brought back his reputation as a really good director in the 90s. It's because people had forgotten, because he had a bad 80s, people had forgotten how good he was. Because they forgot about 7 Days of May and things like that. They remember Manchurian Candidate, but that was about it, and they just, you could bring up Prophecy, which was not one of the best films, but you forget the technique of something like Black Sunday, French Connection 2, even from the 70s. Or the great stuff in the 60s, Birdman of Alcatraz. There was lots of good stuff there. So his reputation did come back in the 90s, even despite Island of Dr. Moreau, but he did make Ronin here. And Ronin was like a return to form in a sense of, it's not Manchurian Candidate, but it's a damn good, fun thriller that you can put on every couple of years and really enjoy. Because it's a really good dynamic between De Niro and John Reno as the two leads. They're really enjoyable together. The place that played two guys who were Secret Service, they've been kind of thrown out. They're like the disavowed list in Mission Impossible, where they're spies who no longer are spies and have to make a living in the open market and doing jobs for money they might not want to do. And they've got a job dealing with these Irish people who are obviously terrorists, try to get this case. You never find out what's in the case, but it's an important case. The Russians want it, the Irish want it, the Americans want it, everyone wants it. And they're going to rip it off from the people who have it at the time. So it's about them, the start of the film is basically them getting their weapons ready, so buying weapons to do the job, scouting the job, and then doing the job. Now, David Mamet came in and did a rewrite of the script, and you can tell because it's very Mamet-like, but it's a really good rewrite because it focuses the script to what it needs to be, which is about what's the relationship between these two guys who are out of sorts with their spy masters, and it's basically they're the Ronin now. They're the masterless spies who no longer belong to anybody, and it's really about that experience rather than anything else. The plot builds upon that. So when I talked before about Wakanda Forever in another video, but how that absolutely buggers everything up by not being very good at dealing with the emotional stuff tied to the plot, and both things suffered. This one's a perfect example of how you do it right. There's a subtext to the story of these disavowed spies. It does make them depressed, it does make them tired and world weary, but it does not. It's still part of the plot, and it's about that. It's always there within the interactions, but it never slows the plot down. The plot's still always going ahead, but you get all these nice little touches. And again, it's one of Mamet's more interesting bits of rewriting, where he films in everything beautifully, and he lets the actors go and do their thing, and it's really enjoyable. And he's got someone like John Frankenheimer to direct it, who knows how to do the no-nonsense stuff, but also can deal with actors. So he can do the action stuff with the actors, but he also can do the character stuff with the actors, and stay out of the way and let them do their thing. So it's really well done. You've got a lot of good supporting actors in here. Michael Legrand is a French spy master. You've got Stellan Skarsgård very early on in his career, when people started to first notice him, really. You've got Natasha, I can't remember her surname, who's the lead contact for De Niro in the thing, in the operation. So she's in the whole story, and he forms a bond with her because he knows she's in too deep with something she shouldn't be really involved with. There's Jonathan Pryce, who's the Irish kind of man in charge who keeps a distance from everybody. You know, you have Sean Bean in a small part, who's a lot of fun because he's a show-off guy. You've got a couple of other character actors as well in there. Everybody does a part, everyone's good. Everything's really enjoyable. And, you know, it's a case of every actor delivers what they need to deliver. And they're all part of our group, who are all in the same path, really, in style and what the film's about. They understand what film they're in. And no one goes off track and tries to make it about themselves. Everyone knows what film they're in. And Frankenheimer knows exactly what film he's doing, so he knows how to keep the plot plugging away to keep your interest. That's the plot point here, that's the plot point there. We'll get from A to B. And it keeps everything interesting. The action scenes are terrific. There's two great car chases. There's a car chase in France when they're first doing the hijacking, which is wonderful. And then there's an even better car chase. Well, this is one of the best car chases of the 90s, which is in France and Paris, as all hell breaks loose in Paris and they destroy so much stuff. It's a car chase that Bourne's always been ripping off, really. I mean, Bourne, they say that the Bourne stuff is trying to be a French connection, but it's really ripping this film off. It's really Ronin, because Bourne had a car chase in Paris in the first one, and every chase they have since then always seems to be aping this film. And even Mission Impossible, the last one, had a car chase in Paris that definitely was influenced by this film. You know, I think it's hard to do a Paris car chase scene without being influenced by Ronin, this scene, because it is so brutal and so seemingly out of control, but it's really a lot of really good stunt drivers doing their thing. And it's really well photographed. So the action really delivers. The plot is enjoyable. I mean, it's not the most outstanding plot, but it delivers what it is. It needs to do, and the plot actually works so that it comments on the states of the characters without overdoing it, and it allows the characters to get more character work from them without making it a strain on the film. So you just get a feeling of this is a film that's working really well, because it's like the plotting's working. It's a generic plot, but it really works because you really understand the situation, and it always progresses to the next phase. And there's a lot of character work where there's nice surprises and twists and turns. People make mistakes, very human mistakes. People do surprising things. People show affection that maybe they don't want to show. People start to like each other and dislike each other the way they would in normal life. And there's just lots of interesting things always going on. Because again, you've got an experienced director in Frankenheimer, experienced cast, and everybody knows what they're doing. And yeah, feeling it was loose enough so that they could actually just rely sometimes on looks rather than always having to do everything through dialogue. So when the dialogue's there, it works, but sometimes it's looks, you know, and they understand what the story is, understand the text, and also actors also understand when, okay, we shot up now, this is an action scene. And also, more importantly, know how to behave in an action scene so it feels realistic and character-based. So it's not just actors in an action scene, it's like, it feels like the characters in that action scene. So they all know what they're doing. It's a really enjoyable old school way of filmmaking that kind of died off after this. I mean, there was no one really doing something like this since then. They've tried to ape it in Bourne and other films. Obviously, a lot of directors are influenced by this, but this is the end of that generation of people who could do it, who kind of came up with that kind of 60s, 70s action movie style and how it evolved. Because whatever followed was the people who were influenced by it, wasn't the originators of it. This is wonderful. Ronin's wonderful. It's just great fun. I do watch this every couple of years. It's just enjoyable. It's just silly fun, but it really works. I mean, you don't want to go into the plot too much. I mean, the plot ultimately, and compared to real life politics, doesn't make a lot of sense. But it doesn't matter because it knows it doesn't make. It makes enough sense for you to be in it, but it knows it doesn't really stack up if you look at it too closely. But it works fine for what it needs to be. So, go watch Ronin. It's really enjoyable. If you've not seen it, it's worth seeing because it's a really good old school thriller with some really good action. Right, that's me for now. Bye.